Professional Development Center, and I'm going to moderate our discussion with our wonderful alum, Yaron Deskalo, who graduated in 2007 from Albany Law School. And we're really going to let him run the show in terms of some of the information that he is going to be able to share with you. He has a very storied career, and as I understand it, is currently the executive producer at SoHi Media. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yaron, who's agreed to let us record this program. So in the event that you are not able to stay for the whole session, look for the email from us with the link to the recording. So with that, Yaron, tell us a little bit about how'd you get to sunny California and what you're doing out there.
Sure. And again, thanks for having me, and look forward to chatting with all of you on here. So hope everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. How did I get out here? So I had gone undergrad to Syracuse, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My major in college was broadcast journalism. So I really kind of knew I wanted to be in this field, whether it was sports or whether it was just production in general. And so I had gone to school at Syracuse for that. And as I got towards the end of my time at Syracuse, I had graduated early and had decided that, it was probably a good idea production would always be there. And I thought if I was going to go back to school, this was the right time to do it. And part of the plan for me was to go back for my JD and my MBA. I knew I wanted to be in the production field, but I didn't know if I wanted to be a producer my entire life. And I thought that having that asset for me with a JD and an MBA made a lot of sense. With ESPN being in Connecticut and having interned there after my junior year of college, and then in the 6 or 7 months in between, senior year of college and the start of law school, I thought it was best to stay out on the East Coast within close proximity to Hartford, where ESPN's headquarters were, just to kind of keep that line of communication open. So, I talked with a lot of the bosses at ESPN because I always knew I wanted to get back there, and asked them, what do you guys think about me going to law school? And, does that make a lot of sense for someone on my track who at that point was just a production assistant making, $24,000 a year and hoping to kind of, continue to grow? And he said, look, if you stayed here in 3 years, you would probably end up, becoming a producer. If you came back in 3 years, maybe you'd be at that spot already. We don't really know. So, this is the time to do it. I very much felt at the age of 22 that I wasn't ready to just kind of pack it in and join the workforce and never leave it. I felt from my perspective that it was a good idea to experience law school and business school for 3 more years. So I did that. Albany Law, I did 1 year at Albany Law, then 1 year at Union. And by doing the summers, and doing the MBA in a full calendar year, I essentially came back to Albany Law for my 3rd year and was able to graduate with my class after 3 years with the JD MBA, which to me was more of kind of a timing thing to just kind of get it done. At that point, I think after kind of my 1st year, I really did find that though I liked the law, I didn't see myself necessarily practicing. So I knew that this law degree would be an asset to me, just like the MBA would. I ended up taking the bar exams because at that point, you have the knowledge to do it. It's a good fallback. I felt if I needed it. So I took New York and Connecticut and passed those. But really, 10 days after leaving, 10 days after the bar, I started work at ESPN. And I came there as a new show had just gotten started called E60, which is still on the air. And I was one of their kind of founding producers. And it was really great timing because my mentor over at ESPN was essentially the number 2 over there and said, hey, we got this gig. We don't know how long this show's going to go. We can sign you to a year contract. Maybe the show gets picked up. Maybe it doesn't. I know it doesn't necessarily fit your kind of law background, but if it's something you want to do and you're a good producer, you should do it. So I did it. And, I was definitely the resident, investigation expert as a producer. Being able to comb through legal documents was fairly easy for me. So I handled a lot of the journalism stories, the stories that kind of went out around the world, did some investigations. We did some really great stories, and really used that time in my late 20s to kind of travel the world on ESPN's dime and tell really awesome stories with some true pros. And it was a great learning experience. And I did that for about 4.5 years. And then I, took over a new show that was created at ESPNU called Unite, where I kind of got the keys to a completely new show, got to create it from scratch, which was a hell of a learning experience. Did that for about a year. And then what brought me out to LA was Fox Sports was launching their new cable network. So I came out here in 2013, worked there for 3.5, 4 years in a variety of kind of management roles, overseeing their flagship show and then overseeing documentaries. And then I felt in 2017, with all the contacts I had made, it was time for me to kind of go out on my own and, experience what it was like to be my own boss and try to maximize a lot of the contacts that I had created over kind of 8 to 10 years in the production and broadcasting business. So many of the people that I had worked with in the past had moved on to other companies. And so I felt like they were good contacts to hire me, and they were eventually. So we've been at it for about 3.5 years. Originally, we kind of started out as a company that really wanted to create stories from social content. We created something called the Social Highlight back at ESPN, which wasn't unlike what was being done at Snapchat or other places. And we were not aiming to be the next Snapchat, but we thought that there was some real value in the content people shot on their mobile devices and a means of telling real high-end stories, combining it with interviews and other content. So we did some of that, but then we started to shift to more long form. So we've created a fair amount of shows. We do a lot of stuff in the sports space, now in the esports space. We've done some podcasts. So we're definitely expanding, and the pandemic has been, a time for us to, we plan to be in a lot of industries by design that in some ways are kind of growing and young and turned out to be somewhat pandemic proof, like esports, like podcasts. And we also do some betting content with Fox. So that's where we are today. I can always just keep talking, but I'll stop talking now. But yeah, that's how I've essentially gotten out here, and LA's a great place for certainly my business. I think we're now seeing here in the last 6 months that you can do a lot of stuff from anywhere. But I still do enjoy kind of being out here. It definitely is the heartbeat and the center of content creation.
So thank you for the introduction. I'm curious, given the fact that you knew that you were interested in media when you started out in college, it sounds like, and then when you came to law school and business school, did you, were there certain courses that you had taken that have really been helpful to you in the new role that you have right now?
I took an internet law course at Albany Law, and I was in law school between 04 and 07. So you're talking kind of right at YouTube's creation. Mm-hmm. And all kind of the privacy that was being talked about with these new kind of social networks that were kind of popping up. It was right at Facebook's infancy. So I really enjoyed and still remember kind of writing a paper about Google and YouTube and, how it had grown so quickly and gotten purchased by Google. But just kind of understanding how quickly the media landscape oftentimes changes before the law changes, and how that's opened up a lot of holes. And we're seeing it today, and the law is always kind of playing catch up. But I do remember that very well. I enjoyed constitutional law, but I enjoyed it just for more the historical aspect more than anything else. Certainly on the business side, I really did enjoy a lot of the marketing classes because it was something I really didn't take. My track was so specific at Syracuse that it was so focused on broadcasting. So, beyond kind of freshman and sophomore year, I didn't take anything really outside of those majors. So for me, it was learning the law was just kind of like learning a new language for me that you kind of just never forget. But I kind of knew immediately I was not going to be the person in my family that people would come to when they had a legal question and said, like, how do we approach this? And be like, I don't know, call a lawyer. Like, I can't tell you that. So I really did kind of focus on it as a opportunity for me to have 3 more years in my kind of early 20s to make new friends, enjoy myself, learn more about myself.
Sure.
And just kind of expand what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew ultimately, at the cost of whatever it was, that even if I wasn't going to practice, I knew that the path would benefit me here. And it still does to this day. It still benefits me. I mean, I don't think anybody hires me because I have a JD, but I think it probably always gave me some clout at ESPN and certainly in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
But it just helps me think about how I approach my contracts a little bit more wisely. I try not to do anything without my lawyer because I know how important lawyers are to looking at every single line. So I think that has definitely been an impact. I'm a big believer in just everything kind of happens for a reason, and this was the path that I chose. And so I wouldn't be here without that path, whether on the daily affects me.
Sure, sure. So I know from just looking at some of the faces of the students that are on our call today, that some of the students have strong interests in the music industry or entertainment, or sports more specifically. And I think in some of the more traditional ways to practice law in those professional areas. And I'm wondering, I want to open it up to them in just a quick second, but just broadly, what kind of advice would you give a student, especially 1Ls and 2Ls who may come into law school, who really think that, those industries, I really just want to sink my teeth into them and right away. Sometimes they get advice from us that says it may take a little bit of time. What gold nuggets could you pass on to them to help them to realize they just need to stay the course, and how to go back?
Yeah. I would say, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do as a 1L and a 2L, and you can have a really great idea. I think what I have found in my career is that instead of finding out what I truly want to do, all these opportunities for me have told me more about what I don't want to do, and I've gotten so many vast opportunities, within my world, within my production world, that every time I do something, I learn more about myself. I get more tools on my tool belt that allow me to essentially create more content. But ultimately, what it lets me do is it lets me understand what I don't want to do, and keeps me more and more narrowly focused. And I think for the 1L and 2Ls that are looking to get into this industry, I think as much as you can to connect with people. We didn't have LinkedIn at that time. I very much in my industry try to be as open as I possibly can with young people that are persistent, that just want to know, that just want to pick my brain. I'm always open because I had people like that for me. And I think you have to take advantage of a lot of those tools, because I think in this space, and especially in this world where so much of this work is being done on kind of a trust-like basis when you're not always in the office, to be able to prove kind of that persistence and that ability to try new things that might be a little bit scary. I take on jobs all the time where I don't know if I can pull it off. I know we will, but I don't at that moment know how I'm going to pull it off. And I think if you can approach where you eventually want to be and know taking those risks, you might not be in a position to succeed right off the top. People certainly in my position, and I think in hiring positions, want to see people that can take risks and that learn quickly. So if you don't know exactly what you want, great, but you know the industry that you want to be in, find the right people that can help you get there. I'm sure it's not advice you don't give, which is, keep knocking on doors and keep asking people, keep taking advantage of networks, and, keep trying to sell yourself at the opportunities that might not be great at the outset, but might give you an opportunity to move into a different role as you continue to grow. Because so much of my business is about who you know, right? That, when I hire a audio guy or a camera person in a certain city, And if I know somebody else in that city, I will just say, hey, who do you know over there? And there's probably 1,000 people who are out there that, are advertising in certain places, but I'll simply go to one person, ask them who they trust. They say, I trust this person, and I hire that person. And that's as simple as it is. And that might be unfair to kind of the vast amount of people that are out there that are trying to get that edge. But I think a lot of businesses are like that. So the more people you know in that industry, the more people that can say, oh, I know that person and I think highly of that person. I think, the faster you'll get that foot in the door. And it's a long game, right? I mean, I've been in the business, I would say, for 15 years, and I still feel like I got a lot of room to grow. We all want to get there a lot quicker than it takes, but if you realize the steps matter, then you can have a little bit more confidence in the fact that things might be taking a little bit longer.
No, I think that's excellent advice. And I do think that one of the things that we encourage students is that, sometimes the practice areas and the skills that you build in other places will just help you to be a little bit more ready when some of those opportunities present themselves, or when you find yourself saying, okay, I don't know everything, but I'm ready to sort of take this on. What
Right.
I to do in the spirit of the fact that I know the students are, they're in a crazy place, as I know you are professionally. So I'm going to invite students to just either raise your hand and ask a question, because I want you to have this opportunity to talk to Yaron. I could talk to him all afternoon, but that's not what you want. So raise your hand, ask a question. If you want to put something in the chat, we'll monitor that and we'll ask it for you. But anybody have any questions? Go. Come on. All right, I'm going to ask you one. Would you hire a new student right out of law school to work in the kind of business that you're in? Would that ever make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot on, our industry is very much built on, the idea of, can you learn quickly? And what we find with a lot of the young people that we hire, a lot of it is about, giving them tasks that they can then excel in very quickly. Would a law student succeed? I'd have no doubt that they would. Would they want to do the type of work that we typically do? I don't know. That's a really great question. But yeah, I mean, I'm all open. And we just brought on somebody who I had met, who had been in touch with me for 2 or 3 years and just had been really persistent, had some experience, but ultimately I could just tell she was sharp and she just wanted to learn. So it became very easy for me to just say, hey, can you help with this? Hey, can you do this? And, it gives me confidence that every time I ask something of her and she does a great job with it, then I can give more and more. And really, ultimately, that I think is, the kind of meter of success in a lot of fields, but certainly in our field, that's what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, we've got a question from Nate. Nate.
Okay.
You're on.
Hi, Yaron. Nice to meet you. I'm Nate.
Nice to meet you. Hey, Nate.
I'm 1L, and I was really, when I saw the flyer about this, I was just really curious to kind of see like where you are in like law school. Those two things don't generally seem to be mixed together. And I know you kind of broadly talked about it, but did you feel, because you knew you wanted to stay in this industry, and did you feel before going to law school that you knew like this was something that was definitely going to help your career in your field? Or were you more of, like you said, like I wasn't ready to kind of pack up and just start working and I kind of wanted to make more friends? And like, do you feel like from graduating law school and acquiring skills that not many people have, like has that just really helped you become more productive in your day-to-day and kind of growing your business? And you could explain.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I really went into law school, I think, thinking that, anything could be possible, right? I think that ultimately what I've found is that I love producing and I love building and creating. But I didn't know if the field I wanted to go in this business was maybe more on the programming or even on the legal side. I honestly didn't know that at that point, but I did love the business as a whole. And so I kind of went in with the idea that I probably want to come back to this industry, but I also don't know exactly at what role or in what part of the business I wanted to be back. It ended up working out where there was actually another job on the table in the programming division that was a little bit more about just kind of solving problems for the programming side on ESPN. And I had that choice, or to go with my mentor to do production work and travel and tell stories. And I kind of knew that that would be a little bit more engaging. And so, there were a lot of things that I was able to do in those kind of first couple of years at E60 that I think my law degree helped me, but it wasn't one of those things that like I could specifically touch and say, well, I learned this in this class and that's why I can apply it here. The ability to read faster through investigative documents was a big reason why we were able to have a lot of success as a show, to be able to tell stories that other shows wouldn't otherwise tell. And so there were ways where I could more directly touch things in those early years. And then I think as I kind of grew to start my own business, again, the law degree for me has kind of been this like hovering cloud that just exists, as opposed to actively saying I'm using it all the time. And so I feel really confident with that idea, in that sense of that's why I chose to go to law school. And would I be in the same place if I didn't? Probably not. But if I would have stayed at ESPN when I was 22 and didn't go away for 3 years and just kept grinding there, like, would I have had the same success? Potentially. But I also wouldn't have had the opportunity to kind of do law school and do business school. And I just knew if I was 27, I wouldn't go back to school. I wasn't that type of person. I was going to I want to just get it done and go with it. So, to kind of answer the question, I don't know specifically if I can kind of identify that I'm touching specific things with my law degree, even as I've had my own business. I think I talk with my lawyer all the time, and I try not to be like the guy who has the law degree trying to oh yeah, I totally get what you're saying on I'm just no, just tell me, I can understand it and read it and understand the consequences of something, but I really don't, try to wear, my law school hat, right? It's kind of like a doctor who has a diagnosis that's like a patient, right? You don't want to go in with that preconceived notion, even if you feel you already know. So yeah, I'm just super confident in kind of the path that I chose. I don't know if it'd be any different. I don't know if, having a law degree has actively, helped me, but it's hard for me to say it hasn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Great.
We have
Thank
a
you.
question from Akang. I don't know if I pronounced it right. Akang?
Yeah, you got it. Hey, Yaron.
Hey, man,
Thanks so
how
much.
are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for talking with us today. Actually, I have two questions. My
Sure.
first one would be, I know you took the more non-traditional route with obviously your law degree, but in terms of in your industry, how much do you interact with lawyers, and sort of what roles do they play? And then my second question, I'm definitely a fan of the E60 program. I love the storytelling and in-depth storytelling involved with sports. So maybe talk about some of your more favorite programs that you worked on, or something that stuck with you.
For sure. Okay, so first question, I have counsel with me that kind of reviews all of our contracts. We actually have a deal kind of upcoming with Peacock, which is an NBC affiliate. And so I very much have just kind of learned to bring him in very, very early in the process and really just try to take a step back. I really try to wear the hat, as I was mentioning before, where I don't have a law degree, because if I go in with those assumptions, then I think that, I might, bypass what might be an important question to my lawyer. So we interact every time a deal gets done. We're interacting with lawyers. And very much as I've kind of grown the business, I've tried my best not to play that role of a lawyer and bring in my counsel. We are now at the stage in kind of this upcoming deal that we hope to sign, where we have to bring in a First Amendment counsel, right? I remember First Amendment fairly well. I can remember the words actual malice and all of that, but I'm not going to like pretend like I'm an expert. We talk a lot about fair use. I don't purport to know the 4-part test, but it's helpful to be knowledgeable about it. It's just, to me, it's the language and the understanding so that, I can more quickly be cost effective with my lawyer to have them to look at something very specific, as opposed to just like passing something over and saying, hey, I don't know anything that's in here. I can understand what clauses might be a little bit, different from some of the other contracts. So we deal with them, certainly with any of the corporate clients we deal with, we're always put in touch with a lot of the legal counsel. But again, as much as I can, I try to loop in my lawyer, who is really kind of a solo proprietor, and he's just by himself, and he's really great and really sharp. And, we've kind of found a really good relationship, but he doesn't view me as anybody who has like a law degree. So he thinks that, well, if I don't catch it, you'll catch it. That's definitely not the case. Second question on my favorite stories. There's a lot. We did a story in Liberia on the African Amputee Cup, which was a soccer tournament that was played in the late 2000s, so like 2007 and 8, where a lot of the soccer players were victims of the civil wars in Africa. And so we did a story on Liberia on kind of these two guys that were on the team. If you played in the field, you were missing part of your leg. If you were a goalie, you were missing one of your arms. And we did a story on the goalie and one of the field players who had each lost their limbs, but they were actually on opposite sides of the Civil War. The goalie was a child soldier, and the striker, who was missing most of his leg, was an infant during it and was in a very famous church massacre, and he somehow survived. And so we told their story about these two guys from opposite sides of the war that had joined the same team to kind of heal a much needed country in need of healing. So we were able to tell that story. We went over to Africa, to Liberia for 10 days, and got to spend some time, which was an amazing experience, and kind of came back and was able to sell Nas to voice it and lend his music to it, which was really a phenomenal story. So that was one of them. And then we also did an investigative story on a guy up in Binghamton, a basketball player who came over from Serbia, and he got into a bar fight with a guy not bigger than me, 5'6", and you can imagine a 6'7" basketball player against a guy who's 5'6", and essentially took his size 15 sneakers and stepped on the guy's head for about 30 seconds and put him into a coma. He had some connections in the Serbian government, and after his arraignment on felony assault, which I think faces up to 25 years, his mom obtained a fake passport, and he fled the country to Serbia. And we went to Serbia and found him, and he was playing basketball in a Serbian B League out there, and it became a huge state diplomatic issue. Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer were threatening to pull funds from Serbia over his extradition, and so that was like a really big international story that we were able to tell. So those were probably my two favorites that I had an opportunity to do kind of early on while I was there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Derek, hi.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming and talk to us. I also went to Syracuse, so go Orange.
Awesome.
I was just wondering, like, especially in the age now, I feel like a lot of like older practitioners and professionals are like not as open to like the communication like through LinkedIn and like informational interviews that are like so much more prevalent now. And I was just going to ask you, like, what do you think is like the appropriate ways to communicate? And like a lot of times, like people aren't necessarily asking for jobs, just like genuinely like connections and just to like learn about like the cool things that like you do. Like wouldn't be easily discoverable, like just through looking at someone's profile, like you have to reach out or email or things like that. So like, what do you think is like the appropriate like communicative threshold for things like that, informationals, and just like keeping in touch and keeping connected?
Yeah, I think, it's a great question. My sense on kind of communication, and, I'm still at the stage in some ways that you guys are, right? I'm still trying to find new business. I'm still trying to meet new people. I think about that a lot. My sense of it always is to try to stay in touch with people, so it doesn't come across that when you're reaching out to them, you're asking for something, that you're just kind of reaching out just to say hi, like you said, just to kind of connect, any type of advice, as opposed to like, hey, I need this, or hey, can I help with that? And so I very much try to kind of keep on a 2 to 3 month cyclical basis where I'm just checking in with people. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. I'm just saying hi. And then that time when you do, it's not like, oh, this person's just reaching out because they want to say hi. I think you're right that some people are kind of LinkedIn averse, which is troubling and challenging. I've always approached it, and my advice to anyone, certainly in my field, is, the worst thing they can do is not respond, or just say like, no, I don't have any time. And it never hurts to pick up the phone and cold call. It never hurts to send an email. I'd like to think that, people will take the time to realize that they were once in that position and that they would want to learn. I also think it's super important, if you ever can, to establish some type of personal connection, even if it's just like what you said, like, hey, I went to Syracuse too. Like, sometimes that's just enough for people, right? It's something very simple that, just says I'm on the same level as you. I'm just letting you know, like, oh, hey, or I've done my research or whatever, that you can just add something small. And, as I kind of tell the person who just, got a job for me, she had been in touch with me for 2.5 years. And there were times where she would email me and I just wouldn't email back, not because I didn't want to, it just got buried in the inbox. And I said, if I'm not responding, it's just because like I'm busy and it got buried and I forgot. I'm not doing it because I don't want to talk to you. So it never hurts to be persistent. Never take someone's non-response as a means that they looked at and like, screw that person, I'm not going to talk to that person. It might just be you caught that person at a wrong time. So I think persistence is so valued in that world, and even in any world. And I think even the people that aren't on LinkedIn, probably value that type of, persistence, even if their method of LinkedIn is like, meeting out for coffee or for a drink, right? So I think it never hurts to like keep trying and to keep trying to connect, whether it's phone or email, and try to establish some type of personal connection whereby you're just connecting and reaching out, without saying, hey, what do you got for me?
That's great. Thank you.
Yep, you got it.
Did you have another question, Hikang?
Oh no, I forgot to put my hand down. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. How about others? What are you thinking about? I think one of the things that struck me, and I just wanted to ask you about this. So, we work with all of our students, and actually at the law school now, students are assigned to a career counselor when they start out in their first year. So we get to know the students pretty well, and it's really been a good experience from our perspective, and we hope for the students as well. But one of the things that we've been trying to stress is helping students to really identify their strengths and to be able to put the language behind that as they are networking or writing documentation for applications, resumes, cover letters, and so on. And I wondered, you've spoken a lot about your strengths just in the conversation that we're having, but not specifically saying these are my strengths. And I wondered if you could just do that for the students. If you and I were in an interview and I said to you, what are your top 3 strengths? Could you?
It's been a long time since somebody asked me that question.
Sorry.
It's a good question. I think I have the ability to, I think I'm genuine in a lot of just the communication that I have with people in general. I care, I think, a lot about what other people think of me, but also just what people think in general. And I've tried to use that a lot more, being on the outside and kind of running my own business, and having a responsibility to the people that work for me, but also to my clients. I think I'm a lot better at that than I was when I was in the corporate world. You know, we all kind of sat there, as you always do in the corporate world, and wonder, you know, did I say something wrong in that meeting? Like, do I need to speak up? Am I getting promoted? Like, why is that person getting promoted and not me? You know, I have very much found that, you know, if I can just be genuine in what I'm doing, and kind of approach each project in a way where we want it to be great and I want to devote the time to be great, I think people really appreciate that. And I think that's why people end up coming back. I work really hard. And I think that's important as well, is people want to see that when they're handing something off. I find that a lot of people hire me because they're executives and they have a problem that they need solved and they don't want to deal with it. And they're like, you can go and do it. And I just want to hear about it when it's over. Like, I don't want to hear about problems. I don't want to hear about any issues. Like, we just want you to address it. And I'm really good at that. Because I've been in that management role and I understand what they're going through. They're essentially bringing me on to be their voice. I can certainly reach out to them, but ultimately they are asking me to just solve that problem. So I'm a good problem solver. And I would say I'm a risk taker. I mean, I think that that's so important. I think my entire career is full of kind of micro and macro risks. You know, a micro risk when we went into a Venezuelan prison for one of my E60 stories where, you know, there were no guards in the prison, right? There were guns and knives and like what have you. That's just the way Venezuelan prisons work. I didn't know that, but that's the way they work, because we were interviewing a former baseball player that was in prison. So, you know, I always kind of took those risks as a producer, but, you know, I left my pretty cushy Fox Sports job 3.5 years ago with, you know, a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old and 3 months worth of savings. And, you know, I didn't know if it was going to succeed. I really didn't. And my business is still young, you know, and hopefully we continue to grow and get through this pandemic and continue to, you know, approach new clients and find everything that we want to find and continue to grow. But, you know, I don't necessarily think about, I'm a risk taker, I'm going to leave I'm going to leave my work right now, I'm going to start my own company. It's just, I don't think we get those opportunities that come to us very often. And I have a lot of confidence in myself to be able to succeed. And I think we all need to have that type of confidence as we go out into the job world, because that's what people are hiring oftentimes, is confidence and risk taking. And, you know, you might not know the answer. I oftentimes don't know the answer to the questions people are asking me when they say, hey, we need you to do a live stream show with 10 locations. Like, sure, we'll do it. Like, I don't know the first thing about it, but I will learn it, and I will hire the people to do it. And so I think as you start to approach your career, understand that it's okay to not know the answers. No one expects you guys to know the answers right now, but if you prove you're a risk taker, I think people will really appreciate that, you know, and they'll appreciate you being a fast learner as well.
Well, I think you got an A. What do you guys think on being able to his top 3 strengths?
I could not. I wouldn't even know how to update my resume at this point or answer an interview question like that.
But you just did. But you just did, and I appreciate it, because you know, we all come back to that at different points when we're talking with students about, you know, what are your strengths and how do you leverage that? And
definitely,
the things that struck me in what you were just talking about is that can-do spirit and that agility. And one of the things that we've had conversations with our students within the last 8 months is, you know, this pandemic is nobody's friend, but it's an opportunity to learn about ourselves and business. I'm wondering, could you just speak to that a little bit? Just maybe some of the opportunities and challenges from a business perspective of what you may or may not want to share that, but I think it's
no, there for sure. There are a lot of challenges. I think we were lucky early on in the pandemic, from a business perspective, that the spring for us was kind of locked in on a big project that we had been doing pre-pandemic, but had been largely shot. So we could still complete the project with very little. It wasn't 100% of what we envisioned it when we signed the deal in December, but it was maybe 85 or 90% of what we thought it would be. So, almost through June, I was kind of working on one thing that ultimately hadn't really changed. But it is a challenge. Really from a substantive perspective in my field, we go out and we shoot a lot of stories. I'm physically in the field in people's homes and doing interviews and traveling. All of that's really been kind of put on hold. A lot of my camera team has, gotten back out there and started to travel, but, their life has changed a little bit. They're wearing masks and they're filling out COVID questionnaires. I think that there are liability questions that we think about a lot, that we have to be real careful about, especially if we're going into a professional athlete's house, and it's a representative of my team and how they act, with larger repercussions than just that physical player. If it's a current NFL player who's playing on an NFL team and gets sick because my guy, I mean, that's a big deal when it affects an entire team and an entire league. So, we produce a show on Tuesday nights from my office here in El Segundo. And we have 6 people in the office and everyone's got to wear masks and we, temperature check and we got to socially distance. I mean, those are the challenges that just exist today. And then, from a business perspective, a lot of the big networks are, trimming back. ESPN cut a lot of jobs recently. Fox cut a fair amount over the summer. I think that, my industry from a kind of freelance perspective, there are a lot of people out there, that are looking for work. There are a lot of people that have connections, maybe more experience than I do. So it's not necessarily that it's competitive because, a buddy of mine who owns his own company has always said, if I'm winning, you're winning. And if you're winning, I'm winning. It's good to know people who are doing well because it's very likely that, you will piggyback off of that or, when I can't do something, I will pass along their name. So, but I am finding a lot of people that, are looking, and as we continue to try to build, I think it's really important to just kind of keep that in the back of our mind that there are a lot of people out there and we want to help as many as we can. But those are the same types of people that are also trying to get business from the same clients we are. So we try to stay as aggressive as we possibly can. But it has changed a lot of the media landscape out there. A lot of these sports leagues are losing money by the billions. And so they're not spending as much money on content. The networks aren't filling their obligations for ad time or even just the programming itself. So, we're really mindful of trying to stay 2 or 3 steps ahead and, being in kind of the esports world and the betting world and the podcast world, in some ways was by design, not for a plan that a pandemic was coming, but just an opportunity to see growing businesses. And those businesses that were growing just happened to be a little bit more pandemic proof. So we're always just trying to kind of push our content out there and be aggressive, but be respectful of what the time is right now, because there still is a lot of hurt that's out there. And we just want to be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're closing in at almost 10 of 5. And so I want to ask if there are any other students that have any questions. Is there anything on your mind? Anything you want to share? Anything you just want to say? We'd love to hear from you. If I'm taking one thing from Yaron, it is be out there, take a risk. And this is a good opportunity to just try that on. Just saying. Anyone? All right, one more question from me then. So, words of advice. If you were a 3L right now, looking at, kind of a wonky 3rd year in law school, what would you include in your job search that you think might be helpful for our students to think about?
It's a good question. I feel like I just wouldn't close any opportunity or close any door that might be out there. I think you guys probably all feel a sense of, with impending graduation and being out in the field, you want to have a job. And I think that's important. And I felt the same type of pressure as well, when I was a 3L, and luckily this show was created and kind of gave me this opportunity to jump out there. If that wasn't there, I don't know where I would have gone in my kind of job search. Luckily that had kind of come up early enough that I said that was the right thing for me to do. But I just wouldn't close any opportunity, because you don't know where that will lead, right? A job that sounds terrible right now, that might not be in the field you want to be in, or in the city you want to be in, might lead to a relationship that you might find both personally or professionally, which could take you on any type of path. I would not tell you when I was 25 that I would be here right now doing this. I thought it was maybe a possibility, but I wouldn't have told you that's my path. And I think to be open to different opportunities can lead to completely different experiences, that you should just respect that and be open to that, because you never know where you could end up, or a dead end job might lead you to meeting a manager who's about to leave that job, that's starting their own firm, that wants to bring you and do this. And next thing you know, you meet another person out at an event. So the pandemic is not going to be here forever. I don't know if things will ever be kind of fully back to normal. I think some things that were going to take 10 years to change just ended up taking 6 months and might never go back. I think a lot of that may even benefit the younger people, from kind of a work from home perspective, and, an understanding of how to sell yourself while not physically in person. But I just wouldn't close any opportunity, just because you just don't know where it's going to lead, and who it could get you in touch with. And that's how I always kind of approach it. I try not to say no to anything right now, because I don't think it's good business, but I also think, like, maybe this isn't my favorite thing that I'm doing, but if we do a great job, maybe that cool thing is right around the corner, or that more lucrative thing is right around the corner. So, don't say no, I would say at this point, right?
No, it's excellent advice. And for the 3Ls that are on, I'm sure that they're definitely thinking about that. But we have a question from Elliot.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Your openness and willingness to talk to us, and sharing not only your energy but encouragement has been very uplifting and refreshing, because it is tough to stay motivated when you have so not little to offer, but we're 25-year-olds and have had summer internships, and that's it. So I just really do appreciate having, this opportunity to listen to you own your own business, and you worked at Fox and you worked at ESPN. It's so cool to hear this, So I thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I mean, no one's going to be able to take your law degrees away from you. And that's going to be beneficial if it's not, this spring or in 5 years. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be beneficial. So,
No, and I appreciate what Elliot just said, because I think one of the challenges for students this year has been the lack of opportunity to do networking.
Yeah, that's hard.
Doing our best to do it. And I feel this is a really, we've had some really wonderful engagement opportunities, and this is one of them. But it's still not the same as being able to, sit down or, have a glass of wine with someone or a beer, and
Definitely.
What someone's doing in their career. So, the students have been faced with a challenge, and I think so many of them have really risen to that by trying to be curious in lots of different ways and trying to make connections. And so, I know we're going to close in just a minute, but one of the things we've been asking our alums in particular is, if you're willing to connect with students, afterwards, if you don't mind, if we share your email or some connection point. I think it's always helpful for students to have someone in their wheelhouse that they can turn to. And so
yeah, absolutely. For sure. Yeah,
okay.
Without a doubt.
That's great, because there are students who have interests across the spectrum that may not be specifically in broadcasting or sports, but are trying to break into different markets. They're a challenge, and a challenge that is just compounded. So
yeah, I took advantage of every person that would listen to me for a half hour. So I'm happy to be that person. And people still do it for me today. So I'm happy to do that. Reach out, share my email, my cell phone, or, LinkedIn, connect with me. That's totally fine.
Okay. So I promise that to the students once we, once Lima, does the recording for us, we'll also share information so that you can connect with Yaron. Does anybody have anything parting that they want to say or ask? I just want to say thank you. This has been such a pleasure. You brightened our afternoon. Truthfully, it was a gloomy November afternoon. So having this opportunity to meet you and to hear from you, and to just, as Elliot just said, to the uplifting piece of it, it's always helpful. And we're reminding each other when we talk to students, especially, is, throw a hand back. Right now it's tough for a lot of people. So when we see it happening, we appreciate it. Our alums are so important to us. So thank you. And on behalf of Joanne, thank you for accepting her invitation.
Of course, anytime.
And thank you. I hope that everybody else has a good rest of their day.
Yeah. Good luck.
We'll see you all
And
soon.
stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.